a cooperative one. They want to share responsibility for any task they take on. Still others have a proximity strategy, which is somewhere in between. They prefer to work with other people while maintaining sole responsibility for a task. They're in charge but not alone. If you want to get the most out of your employees, or your children, or those you supervise, figure out their work strategies, the ways in which they're most effective. Sometimes you'll find an employee who is brilliant but a pain in the neck. He always has to do things his way. Now he just might not be cut out to be an employee. He may be the kind of person who has to run his own business, and sooner or later he probably will if you do not provide an avenue of expression. If you have a valuable employee like this, you should try to find a way to maximize his/her talents and give him/her as much autonomy as possible. If you make him a part of a team, he'll drive everyone crazy. But if you give him as much independence as possible, he can prove invaluable. That's what the new concepts of entrepreneurship are all about. You've heard of the Peter Principle, the idea that all people are promoted to the level of their incompetence. One reason this happens is that employers are often insensitive to their employees' work strategies. There are people who work best in a cooperative setting. They thrive on a large amount of feedback and human interaction. Would you reward their good work by putting them in charge of some new autonomous venture? Not if you want to make use of their best talents. That doesn't mean you have to keep a person at the same level. But it does mean you should give promotions and new work experiences that utilize a person's best talents, not his worst ones. Likewise, many people with proximity strategies want to be part of a team but need to do their own work alone. In any structure there are jobs that nurture all three strategies. The key is to have the acuity to know how people work best and then find a task they thrive in. Here's an exercise to do today. After reading this chapter, practice eliciting people's metaprograms. Ask them, what do you want in a relationship, or house, or car, or career? How do you know when you have been successful at something? What is the relationship between what you're doing this month and what you did last month? How often does someone have to demonstrate something to you before you are convinced it's true? Tell me about a favorite work experience and why it was important to you. Does the person pay attention to you while you are asking these questions? Is he interested in your response, or is he occupied elsewhere? These are only a few of the questions you can ask to successfully elicit the metaprograms we've discussed. If you don't get the information you need, rephrase the question until you do. Think of almost any communication problem you have, and you'll probably find that understanding the person's metaprograms will help you adjust communications so that the problem disappears. Think of a frustration in your life, someone you love who doesn't feel loved, someone you work for who manages to rub you the wrong way, or someone you've tried to help who hasn't responded. What you need to do is identify the operating metaprogram, identify what you're doing, and identify what the other person is doing. For example, suppose you need verification only once that you have a loving relationship, and your partner needs it consistently. Or you put together a proposal that shows how things are like, and your supervisor only wants to hear about the ways they're different. Or you try to warn someone about something he needs to avoid, and he's only interested in hearing about something he wants to go after. When you speak in the wrong key, the message that comes through is the wrong one. It's as much a problem for parents dealing with their children as it is for executives dealing with their employees. In the past, many of us have not developed the acuity to recognize and calibrate the basic strategies that others use. When you fail to get your message through to someone, you don't need to change the content. You do have to develop the flexibility to be able to alter its form to fit the metaprograms of the person with whom you're trying to communicate. You can often communicate most effectively when you use several metaprograms together. My partners and I once had a business disagreement with a man who did some work for us. We got together, and I began the meeting by trying to set a positive frame, saying I wanted to create an outcome that would satisfy both of us. He immediately said, "I'm not interested in any of that. I have this money, and I'm going to hang on to it. I just don't want your attorney calling and bugging me anymore." So he began by moving away. I said, "We want to make this work because we're all committed to helping people and ourselves experience a better quality of life, and by working together we can do that." He said, "We're not all committed to helping other people. I don't give a damn about you. All I care about is that I leave here happy." As the meeting continued with very little progress, it became clear that he moved away from, that he sorted by self, that he mismatched, that he had an internal frame of reference, and he didn't believe things unless he saw them, heard them, and had them continually reinforced. These metaprograms did not add up to a blueprint for perfect communication, especially since I'm the opposite of almost all these things. We talked for almost 2 hours with no progress, and I was almost ready to give up. And then a light bulb finally lit up in my head, and I changed gears. I said, "You know that idea you have in your mind, I have it right here." Then I made a fist. So I took his internal frame of reference, which I couldn't manipulate with words, and I externalized it, so I could control it. Then I said, "I have it right here and you've got 60 seconds. Make your decision or you're about to lose and lose big." I'm not going to lose, but you're going to lose personally. That gave him something new to move away from. I went on from there. I said, "You're self going to lose, move away from, because you don't believe there's a solution that can be worked out." Well, he was a mismatcher, so he started to think the opposite, that there was a solution. Then I went on, "You better check inside yourself and see internal frame of reference if you're really willing to pay the price that you're going to have to pay, day after day, as a result of your decisions today. Because I'm going to continually tell people his convincer strategy about how you behaved here and what you did. You've got 1 minute to decide. You can decide now that you want to work this thing out, or otherwise you're going to lose everything, you personally, forever. Check me out. See if I'm congruent." It took him 20 seconds to jump up and say, "Look, guys, I always wanted to work with you. I know we can work things out." He didn't do it grudgingly. He got up enthusiastically, as though we were true pals. He said, "I just wanted to know we could talk." Why so positive after 2 hours? Because I'd used his metaprograms, not my model of the world, to motivate him. What I'd said would have been an insult to me. I used to get frustrated with people when they behaved in ways that were the opposite of mine, until I learned that different people have different metaprograms and patterns. The metaprogram sorting principles we've dealt with so far are important and powerful. However, the crucial thing to remember is that the number of metaprograms you're aware of is limited only by your sensitivity, awareness, and imagination. One of the keys to success in anything is the ability to make new distinctions. Metaprograms give you the tools to make crucial distinctions in deciding how to deal with people. You are not limited to the metaprograms discussed here. Become a student of possibility. Constantly gauge and calibrate the people around you. Take note of specific patterns they have for perceiving the world and begin to analyze if others have similar patterns. Through this approach, you can develop a whole set of distinctions about people that can empower you in knowing how to communicate effectively with all types of people. For example, some people sort primarily by feelings and others sort by logical thoughts. Would you try to persuade them in the same way? Of course not. Some people make decisions based only on specific facts and figures. First, they have to know if the paths will work, they'll think about the broader picture later. Others are convinced first by an overall concept or idea. They react to global chunks. They want to see the big picture first. If they like it, then they'll think about the details. Some people are turned on by beginnings. They're most excited when they get a new idea off the ground, and then they soon tend to lose interest in it and go on to something else. Others are fixated on completion. Anything they do, they have to see all the way to the end, whether it's reading a book or doing a task at work. Some people sort by food. That's right, by food. Almost anything they do or consider doing is evaluated in terms of food. Ask them how to get someplace, and they'll say, "Go down the road till you get to Burger King, make a left, and then continue down until you get to McDonald's and make a right, and then make a left at Kentucky Fried Chicken until you get down to that chocolate brown building." Ask about a movie they went to, and they immediately begin telling you about how bad the concession stand was. Ask about the wedding, and they'll tell you about the cake. A person who sorts primarily by people will talk mostly about the people at the wedding or the people in the film. A person who sorts primarily by activities will talk about what actually happened at the wedding, what happened in the film, and so on. The other thing an undertaking of metaprograms provides is a model for balance. We all follow one strategy or another for using metaprograms. For some metaprograms we may lean slightly more to one side than to another. For others we may swing wildly to one strategy instead of the other. But there's nothing carved in stone about any of those strategies. Just as you can make the decision to put yourself in an empowering state, you can choose to adopt metaprograms that help rather than hinder you. What a metaprogram does is tell your brain what to delete. So if you're moving toward, for example, you're deleting the things to move away from. If you're moving away from, you're deleting the things you could be moving toward. To change your metaprograms, all you have to do is become aware of the things you normally delete. And begin to focus your attention on them. Don't make the mistake of confusing yourself with your behaviors or doing the same thing with someone else. You say, I know Joe. He does this and this and this. Well, you don't know Joe. You know him through his behaviors. But he isn't his behaviors any more than you are yours. If you're someone who tends to move away from everything, maybe that's your pattern of behavior. If you don't like it, you can change. In fact, there's no excuse for you not to change. You have the power now. The only question is whether you have enough reasons to make yourself use what you know. There are two ways to change metaprograms. One is by significant emotional events. Seize. If you saw your parents constantly moving away from things and not being able to achieve their full potential as a result, it might influence the way you move toward or away. If you only sorted by necessity and missed out on some great job opportunity because the company was looking to someone with a dynamic sense of possibility, you might be shocked into changing your approach. If you tend to move toward everything and get taken in by a flashy-looking investment scam, it would probably affect the way you looked at the next proposal that came your way. The other way you can change is by consciously deciding to do so. Most of us never give a thought to which metaprograms we use. The first step toward change is recognition. The awareness of exactly what we are currently doing provides the opportunity for new choices and thus for change. Let's say you realize that you have a strong tendency to move away from things. How do you feel about it? Sure, there are things you want to move away from. If you put your hand on a hot iron, you would want to move it away as soon as you could. But aren't there things you really want to move toward? Isn't a part of being in control making a conscious effort to make a move towards something? Don't most great leaders and great successes move toward things rather than away? So you might want to begin to stretch a little. You can start thinking about things that appeal to you and actively move toward them. You could also think of metaprograms on a higher level. Do nations have metaprograms? Well, they have behaviors, don't they? So they have metaprograms, too. Their collective behavior many times forms a pattern, based upon metaprograms of their leaders. The United States for the most part has a culture that seems to move toward. Does a country like Iran have an internal or external frame of reference? Think of the last election. What was Walter Mondale's basic metaprogram? Many people perceived him as moving away. He talked about doom and gloom and how Reagan wasn't telling the truth and would raise your taxes. He told us, at least I'll tell you now, we have to raise taxes or disaster is certain. I'm not saying he was right or wrong, just note the pattern. Ronald Reagan was sounding nothing but positive notes, while Mondale was perceived as invoking dark issues. Mondale might have made a lot of sense. There were some major issues the nation needed to confront. But on an emotional level, which is where much of politics has played out, Reagan's metaprogram seems to have more effectively matched that of the nation. Like everything else in this book, metaprograms should be used on two levels. The first is as a tool to calibrate and guide our communication with others. Just as a person's physiology will tell you countless stories about him, his metaprograms will speak eloquently about what motivates him and frightens him off. The second is as a tool for personal change. Remember, you are not your behaviors. If you tend to run any kind of pattern that works against you, all you have to do is change it. Metaprograms offer one of the most useful tools for personal calibration and change. And they provide keys to some of the most useful communication tools available. In the next chapter, we'll look at other invaluable communication tools that will show you